Thank you, Francine. Well, first of all, tariffs are a form of geopolitical power. So just to get that straight, geopolitics is what countries do to project power across their borders. And so tariffs, sanctions are very much within that field. And they are far and away the most prominent instrument of economic statecraft. Our clients tend to be asking us to try to read President Trump's mind. And as you've already talked about earlier in the program, there are lots of pretexts being provided about, what might be motivating these tariffs. The bottom line is, I don't think we're going to be very successful at reading Trump's mind. I think the uncertainty and the confusion is part of the MO, the modus operandi. And I think there's not enough attention being paid to retaliation prospects and what this means more broadly for the rules of the game and clarity around doing business.
Tina, when you look at some of the unorthodox, trade policies, is it too soon to find out how far the White House is willing to go?
I think if we're going to be diplomatic about it, that this is an iterative process, that there'll be an opening salvo and then attempts to negotiate. In our discussions with European member states trying to see how they're thinking about things, we are beginning to see evidence of holding back a bit for fear of potentially inflaming tensions further. And that makes it even harder for market participants to try to anticipate how to position, because it isn't likely to be the case that April 2nd, Liberation Day, we get some clarity, we can all sort of adjust and move on. The UK, for example, has been hoping for carve-outs. That is a double-edged sword. Italy as well, hoping that their better relationship, the relationship between Trump and Giorgia Meloni, might be helpful. I think market participants have kind of given up, and we can see this in this morning's sell-off.
Tina, overall, when you look at also some of the big news this weekend about, the U.S. and the U.K. saying we need to hold strong and maybe be tougher on Russia, how much do you understand the relationship to be between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump at this point? Are they friends? Are they frenemies? Is it an economic advantage, or is it genuinely likability?
I think I've said on your show before that I expect Putin to run rings around Donald Trump. And with that in mind, the tough rhetoric about secondary sanctions, I think should be taken seriously. I think in general we should take President Trump seriously and literally. I don't believe that Putin is serious or has ever been serious about a ceasefire, and that may mean that President Trump gets increasingly frustrated with his erstwhile friend Vladimir Putin, because I don't think that Russia shows any real signs of wanting to come to the table. And frankly, it's also surprising to see President Trump annoyed about casting aspersions on Zelensky's legitimacy when we saw how he was treated in the Oval Office. And so, if anything, the pressure on Zelensky has actually bolstered his popularity at home and backfired in terms of what Putin would like to see, which is a different leader, one more pliable when it comes to what the Kremlin would like to see.
And Tina, where does the UK stand in all of this?
Caught in the middle, or putting a more positive spin on it, the UK really cherishes its role as a bridge between the European Union and Washington. But that bridge is looking a little bit wobbly, and it's a difficult position for Prime Minister Keir Starmer to take. But at the same time, he is, I think, rightfully receiving plaudits for his role. UK is convening a big meeting here in London today. And the question is really, to my mind, is whether the fact that Keir Starmer is a little bit of the teacher's pet when it comes to European leaders actually helps the UK or ends up, potentially causing Starmer more problems than it helps.
Does that mean, Tina, that actually the UK is somewhat, if not exempt, in a favorable position ahead of April 2nd and the massive tariffs coming our way?
I think that's what the hope will be. But again, it's a real double-edged sword, potentially. And it has put Downing Street in the position of having to say that it would consider retaliation. And that's not something that I suspect the Prime Minister would have been wanting to make clear. But it's again, this need to constantly balance between wanting to be working constructively with Washington at the same time as Starmer has been pursuing a UK-EU reset and doesn't want to look to European partners like it's being singled out in a positive way for Washington. So very complex balancing act for the Prime Minister.
And where does this leave China? Again, there's a number of thinkers that say all of this changing geopolitics actually could push Europe closer towards China.
I think there's an opportunity for Europe at many levels. I mean, we have been talking in our research about the mega thesis, make Europe great again, not without many caveats, of course. The possibilities for China, I think, have actually increased as the U.S. has become more erratic in its global leadership. But let's remember, too, that the Chinese leadership is never really in a hurry. It can wait and watch on the sidelines, court potential deals and allies, and kind of do the cleanup when it comes to the potential for deals and for positioning.